There was an article from 1986 that I really resonated with. It was that the labor of the home has to remain invisible. We have to convince women that wiping asses and doing dishes is part of our genetics and our nature. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So taking pride in that made it gendered, and then we could become the social safety net of the world without having to be paid. Life does get more complicated, and couples are still using the most 3 toxic words. When I ask them how they're gonna figure out their domestic division of labor, it's always...
Eve Rodsky is a New York Times bestselling author.
She is a law graduate from Harvard University and an expert on the fairness and division of household labor.
She has helped millions of women worldwide to create fairness in the home.
Overwhelm.
Invisible work.
Burnout.
Boundaries, Louise, is often why women are not sharing the load, because they are believing that they are on this earth to be just 3 things: a parent and or a partner and or a professional, and that their time outside of that doesn't matter. The most beautiful thing for women, their mental and physical burnout literally relies on them being something other than a parent and or a partner and a professional. My home was an organization that was in failure. I knew how to fix failed organizations. So I thought, well, what if I just use that for myself? So I put up on my own whiteboard 3 things that I knew make for a successful organization. So these are the 3 things.
So splitting household tasks, doesn't it just kill your sex life? Eve, welcome to the Slay podcast.
Oh, Louise, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. I've got so many questions for you. First and foremost, I'm a Libra, so I appreciate all things balance and harmony in my life.
When's your birthday?
October 6th.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I love Libras.
Do you have any October 6s?
My beloved grandmother was the Libra, and my son, Zach, is a Libra, and he is totally exactly what you said.
So you know exactly
Fairness,
what you're dealing with.
Justice, balance. Yes.
Eve, explain to us what you do.
I'm an expert now on the gender division of labor, but I want to tell you and your audience that that was not what was on my 3rd grade, what do you want to be when you grow up board, which probably said like astronaut, or veterinarian. And the expert on gender division of labor was definitely not on my bingo card when I remember distinctly Elizabeth Warren, she's a senator now from Massachusetts, but she was our professor at Harvard Law School. And she asked all of us in 1999 what we wanted to do with our law degree. And what I remember about that circle, people went around and they said big things, but I, without any irony, said that I was going to be a Nick City dancer, a senator from New York, and hopefully president of the United States.
Let's go.
But maybe all at once even, because you could fly your Air Force One in to like Madison Square Garden, dance, and then change for like a state dinner on the way back. I think it was that Legally Blonde era. So it's hard. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's important to give context that in the turn of the century in 2000, I thought I'd be smashing all these glass ceilings along the way of my life. And then if you actually cut to my life 10 years later in 2011, the only thing I could tell you that I was smashing was, like peas for my toddler, Zach, while desperately trying to cling on to a corporate job, barely, when they told me that if I had to breastfeed, it would be in a broom closet without an outlet. And having a newborn in the house and trying to hold it all together. So I think the slap in the face, metaphorically, of just how different my life looked in 2011 from how I envisioned it in, you say, 2000, that period of my life is sort of why I became what I became, which is an expert on the gender division of labor.
So speaking of, gender division and labor, what were the numbers with regards to like the division of household work? Because this is one of the things that you speak about every single day. You've written books on.
Yes.
And I was kind of shocked. Eric was my husband was looking up some statistics earlier. And am I right in saying that 80% of the household labor falls on the shoulders of women?
Yes, actually more. If you look at what I call the cognitive labor and the mental load. Why the statistics, I think, don't really capture it is because this work is so invisible. So men often overreport what they do and women underreport what they do.
Interesting.
We're a society of execution, so we like to see things. So the invisible labor, and what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. Around the time that I write about in my book, where my life was sort of falling to shit when I became an expert on the gender division of labor, it was really because my husband Seth. I write about him, his infamous text to me that he keeps saying, like, if he hadn't sent, maybe it wouldn't have sparked this entire movement. But he sent me a text that said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." And I think, again, the invisible nature of somebody sending you something where they may think it's innocuous, where behind the scenes, not only are you being assumed to be the fulfiller of someone's smoothie needs,
Right.
but I had, at that time when he sent the text, I had a breast pump and a diaper bag on the passenger seat of my car. I had gifts for a newborn baby to return in the back seat of my car. Like I said, I was trying to basically hang on to a corporate job. I was racing to pick up a toddler, my son at his toddler transition program, which in America, those programs are like your entire salary and they last about 10 minutes. So I think that it wasn't the blueberries, but it was the context around the assumption that really made me break down. And then around the same time, I was at this breast cancer march that I talk about with women that were like you, literally the most powerful women I knew. There was like an Oscar-winning producer with us and the head of a hospital. And we were at this beautiful march. It was a Saturday morning. Not all of us were married to men, but a lot of us were with kids. And we're covered in pink. We have like signs and glitter. And around noon, it was like we all turned into like the reverse of Cinderella, like pumpkins. And I think if Seth hadn't sent me that blueberry text, I wouldn't have noticed. But what I was watching, back to the invisible nature of this statistics, was every one of those women around noon started to use the phone and look down, and the energy sort of dissipated from everybody. And so I started to look over their shoulders to say, what are they doing? And all of them, Louise, were responding to texts from their partners like, "Where did you put Hudson's soccer bag? What's the address of the birthday party? Did you leave me a gift?" My literally favorite text that I still have on a bulletin board was my friend Kate's husband, and his text just said, "Do the kids need to eat lunch?"
Oh.
And so what was hard about that day was that all of those women left me. Those strong, beautiful women didn't say, "I'm going to turn off my phone." They left me and said that they left their partner with too much to do.
Right.
And so they left to bring a perfectly wrapped gift to a birthday party. They left to find Hudson's soccer bag. They left to feed their kids lunch. But I will say that what I did that day was my first act of resistance. I counted up how many phone calls and texts we had received in 30 minutes before they left. We had 30 phone calls and 46 texts for 10 women over 30 minutes. That to me is a more interesting statistic than that women shoulder 80% of the work. Because I think we all know what that feels like as a woman, to be interrupted, to not have choice over how we use our time. That's how we've been conditioned since birth. And so I always think about that, the 30 phone calls and 46 texts for 10 women over 30 minutes.
Wowzers. So we were talking about this topic today in the gym, and I was not surprised at all by the conversations that we were having. One of the things that came up for a lot of the girls who we were talking about, that shared responsibility of household load. And Eric and I got into a lovely conversation about this earlier, he mentioned that for women, when something isn't necessarily done around the house, let's say the trash hasn't been taken out, that we tend to take that more personally than men. Would you say that that's true?
First of all, I love Eric. I got to meet him today. So you're going to have the best division of labor after this. What do I think it means to take things more personally? Well, I look at it a little bit differently, because take things more personally, that sort of reminds me of my couples therapist with Seth when I was having the blueberries breakdown, and the couples therapist said, "Just use I statements, Eve. Like, say how you feel. Like and I'm like, "I don't understand what you mean."
How
She's
did
like,
that make you feel?
"Say how you feel." And I was like, "Okay, I fucking hate you, Seth." Like that's I didn't know what it didn't work for me. It didn't work for us. But what was working for me, I think at the time, was that my day job, I'm a lawyer for highly complex organizations. family foundations, family businesses, you can sort of picture like HBO show Succession.
Yep. So you're having to deal with like conflict within families every
Yes,
day, the
yes,
navigating of
yes.
funds and division
Everything.
of assets
So
and all
just
those things.
picture, I could literally have written that show. But what I do for my families is I bring some grace and humor and generosity to these really complex organizations. And I've had less clients over time as this other gender justice career has gotten bigger. But what I still think it was so important about that background, about being a lawyer, was that I didn't look at it as whether women were taking things personally. What I decided to look at was what was happening to me and why did I feel like I was taking things so personally.
What was happening?
So what was happening to me was that my home was an organization that was in failure. And so I knew how to fix failed organizations. So I thought, well, what if I just use that for myself? So the first thing I did, literally, and I completely had faith that this would be different than what I'd seen in the past because, and we work with many therapists now, but what I loved about being a lawyer was that I didn't say to you, would you please stop at the stop sign? I think it's good for you to stop at the stop sign. I'm from the school of if you want someone to stop at a stop sign, you pass a law to make them stop at a stop sign. So as a lawyer, I look at the world as a behavior design. The way I looked at this was, okay, my home organization is failing. So I put up on my own whiteboard 3 things that I knew I taught my clients make for a successful organization and really are imperative is after you have kids.
What are those?
And so these are the 3 things.
We need these 3
yes,
things.
and you need them for your gym, and they are sad. Well, you know what? I won't say sadly because you understand the importance of practice.
Yep.
Most people don't. They're boundaries, systems, and communication. That's what you need. Boundaries, systems, and communication. And you know what they do? And we'll talk about all 3. And I started with systems because that's the easiest one to deal with. But when you have a practice of boundary systems and communication in an organization, what it restores is the brokenness of an organization, which is what mine was, which is that I wasn't taking things personally. What had happened to my home organization with Seth and me was that I had lost the 2 most important things every organization has, and that includes your gym, by the way. Any place that you're running is an organization, and that's accountability and trust. And so that's it. It's not about me taking things personally. It was about the fact that I stopped trusting Seth because he stopped taking accountability for the home. And the people all around me were saying the same thing. In the time it takes me to tell him, her, they what to do, I should do it myself.
Yes.
Oh my God, they would never do that. I'm a better multitasker. I'm wired differently to notice that there's a dish in the sink. My job's more flexible, so I do it. We're both colorectal surgeons, but my partner is just off doing something and I can find the time. So what happens is that women, we're not taking things personally. We've lost accountability and trust in our partnerships. And so instead, either we do court-ordered custody. A lot of women get out of those relationships. That's over 80% of divorces are initiated by women. But people who stay need to have an excuse to stay.
Right.
And so we end up justifying why we do this because it's incredibly painful because we all wanted to marry feminist men. And then when you're in this relationship and you're like, oh my God, this person is not the person I thought I married, it can feel incredibly painful and jarring. So we start to accommodate for that lack of accountability and trust.
Do you think that those household habits deteriorate over time? So do you think is there any evidence to show like when you get together and you're a new couple and you're in that kind of like honeymoon bliss phase where you're cooking together and give me this, give me that, and then is there a time when you kind of as a couple normally like fall out of sync?
Yes, there are a couple of times. The most important time is when a couple brings a child into the world. And the reason why is cut to what the fair play, I said boundary systems and communication. What I started to design was a system that's based on, well, it started with a should I do spreadsheet, which didn't work well because making a list does not work.
Why doesn't that work? I love
doesn't
the
work.
idea of a list.
Yeah, lists don't work. Systems do. Let's just say that again. Lists alone
I
don't
was
work.
very
Systems
excited to write down the shit I do list after this
Yes, no,
podcast.
doesn't work. That was the advice I had. But what I will say is that systems work, lists don't. And the reason why that's extra important is because when you have these disruptions, like a child coming into the home, a new job, I call them the wild cards, someone losing their job, a move. Those are times when often the division of labor changes for the worse based on assumption, where we want it to change based on what I call structured decision-making tools. One woman said to me what these concepts of fair play taught her was that she didn't have a magical vagina that whispered in her ear what her husband's mother wanted for Christmas. And I said, that's so great. Like that was something that encapsulated everything I wanted this person to understand.
Yeah.
That the work, the emotional labor to know what your mother-in-law wants for Christmas is not gendered, it's work. So back to that idea, yes, it gets worse with children. I do think things are, for me and Seth especially, and then we have thousands of data points now and hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are playing fair play in 18 countries around the world. And what will I say what I've learned about for 10 years from these couples is that regardless, why do I think things get worse? Because life does get more complicated. And as things get more complicated, couples are still using the most 3 toxic words that I literally feel like throwing something at them when I hear it still.
What
after
are those
10
words?
years. When I ask them how they're going to figure out their domestic division of labor under this circumstance or that, it's always we're going to figure it out.
Oh.
Nobody figures things out. That's like me saying, how are you going to become a decathlete?
Yeah.
And for you to just respond to me, I'll figure it out. It doesn't, no, anything good
Comes from a plan.
comes
and
from
a system.
a plan
Yeah.
and a system.
Absolutely.
Yes. Not a list.
Yeah.
And lists are part of systems.
Right.
But what do I mean by a system? I'll give you an example. There was a systems engineer who said to me that in his household, they wait to decide who's taking the dog out every night, right, when it's about to take a piss on the rug.
Interesting.
But he designed systems during his day, and a system is really not scary. All it is to help you make decisions in an easier way.
Yes.
If you're in a system when you're training, you know what your day is going to be like, right?
Absolutely.
You have like, this is how you hydrate, this is how you eat, this is where you're going to be at a certain time. If every morning you woke up and you're like, hey, what should I be doing today? I promise you wouldn't have gotten to where you got. So I know systems work, and I knew that they could work for the home, and especially if we're working out of these outdated assumptions, like we're going to figure it out, or a systems engineer who knows that, but in his home, he's like, well, home is all about love. I'm like, no, a home is about accountability and trust. And you've lost that if your dog is waiting to go out every single night and somehow you haven't figured out who's taking that dog out.
Absolutely. As simple as that.
It really is as simple as that.
Eve, explain the term unpaid labor.
Okay, that's really an important one because in America especially, and I think in all sort of late stage capitalist countries, we equate labor with wage. So what happens, I believe, is that there's a really beautiful sentiment from a lot of men, like, I'm going to retire my wife. And that, I feel bad for men because, right, that's their box that they have to be in, this like primary breadwinner box, and it's very limiting and really hard. I'm going to retire my wife, or like I make her life. But really, what unpaid labor is, it's everything you do off screen to allow the other person to be empowered into paid labor. Now, most couples don't even fall into that category anymore of one person doing unpaid labor and the other doing paid labor. That's a very like June Cleaver, Leave It to Beaver model. 65% of couples in the U.S. are in dual income households. In those dual income households, and even in one household where there's one breadwinner, the other work, the work of running the home and the family, which I call the should I do spreadsheet, which ultimately became the system of the fair play cards. There's 100 cards, and they represent all that it takes to run a home and family. There are 60 cards in play if you don't have children. You add an additional 40 cards.
Wow.
If a child comes into the world. I think that's incredibly important to just pause on for a second, because unpaid labor is the work of the home organization. It doesn't mean it's necessarily happening at home. Bringing flowers to a recital of your child is unpaid labor, and that's happening outside the home. But it's the work to maintain that home ecosystem. And what people don't even realize is not only does the work of the home get harder if a child's in it, but you're also, in addition, adding 40 extra, what I call these cards. Like diapering and potty training and medical and healthy living for a child. And it gets very, very intense, that work. And so that figure it out model is really, it's
not a path
I'd
to
say
success.
a D minus model, because not only is the work of, say, laundry getting harder. Like laundry you do in a couple. Often I see a lot of couples who don't have kids do their own laundry. Or it's not that hard. There's not that much, laundry. But then when a child comes in, you need a new type of laundry. You use Dreft or these other things to make sure the baby doesn't get rashes. You have baby blankets and onesies and 10,000 onesies because they're spitting up all the time. And all of a sudden, there's a million towels. Labor gets a lot harder. But on top of it, there's 40 extra tasks. So that's why I always say Fair Play is a bestseller in South Korea. And we've watched the birth rates drop like dramatically in the past 5 years. And so I'm taking credit for that. Yes.
So another question I wanted to ask was to clarify cognitive labor. So of those like 40 tasks that go up, in the Fair Play game, and we'll talk about that.
Yes.
Are they physical tasks or cognitive tasks?
Such a good question.
What's the difference?
When I was trying to capture data for this project, I was still a lawyer. This was just a side project because they call research me-search. And again, I had the product of a single mother. I felt like court-ordered custody was what I heard was liberating for women. I really still like Seth. I wanted to stay in our marriage. I just knew it was too unfair at the time for me. So as I said, to collect data, I started to look into the research. There was an article from 1986 that I really resonated with. It was by a sociologist who argued that the labor of the home has to remain invisible. We have to convince women that wiping asses and doing dishes is part of our genetics and our nature. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So taking pride in that made it so that it could become gendered, and then we could become the social safety net of the world without having to be paid. So I found that really resonant. And so I think I was naive and thought I could get all the data by just asking women, and similar to like the women in your gym today, what is it that's invisible that you do that your partner doesn't see? So that's how I started. This was in 2011, after my blueberries breakdown, after the breast cancer march. And it took me 9 months. We didn't have TikTok or Instagram then, so I actually had to call people and use early Facebook. But I did mirror the U.S. Census, and I got, after 9 months, this beautiful list of what women told me that they do that takes more than 2 minutes that their partner doesn't see. And it was 98 tabs, like I said, and 2,000 items of what I called invisible work.
What were the things that were coming up?
Oh, my gosh. It was so fun. I'll give you an example. Like I had a tab of my Excel spreadsheet that was called extracurricular non-sports. And so there would be the activities that are non-sports extracurriculars for your kids. And one woman said to me, oh, I love that like art classes on here and pottery. But what about Girl Scout cookies ordering in sales? So I'd be like, ooh, Girl Scout cookies. Or the spreadsheet would go to somebody. One woman from the Jewish Federation of Arizona said, I see here on your medical and healthy living tab for children, you have the application of sunscreen as 2 minutes. But what about the 30 minutes for the chase? So I'd be like, oh, shit. Yeah, the 30 minutes for the chase. So it was that granular. But what was so beautiful about that was then I could use that to actually start asking data of men and couples. So then I took this should I do spreadsheet, which did not work for Seth. I sent it to him after 9 months. He had no idea I was working on this. He didn't even respond. He gave me like the monkey emoji, like where it's covering its eyes. So again, I learned early that lists alone don't work. Systems do. But that list helped me with my data. And what it did was I was able to go to a home and say, okay, Louise and Eric, who handles groceries? Who handles laundry? The problem is when I start to ask like that, and this is a long, long answer to your cognitive labor question, I was getting inaccurate data. because we know the statistic that women shoulder 80% or more of what it takes to run a home and family. But every single question I asked, both couple, if it was a woman married to a man, it was we both do it. So I wasn't getting, I didn't think, accurate data. How are these women so resentful and angry out there all the time if we're both doing everything?
Yeah.
So this gets back to cognitive labor. What cracked open the fair play system, and it's why I think so many people use it, is because when I changed the question, it illuminated everything. And this gets back to literally the core of cognitive labor. I changed the question to who does groceries to how does mustard get in your refrigerator?
That's a good one.
And I'm telling you, Louise, it changed my life because in 18 countries, even the Nordic ones, like Sweden, where we think everybody's doing Norway, they're doing everything so
figured out.
Got it figured out. They actually don't.
Yeah.
Because it was women married to men doing the same thing, whether it was mainland China or Norway or the US. Women were the ones saying, they're the ones noticing that their second son, Johnny, needs yellow mustard with his protein. Otherwise, he doesn't eat protein. What's beautiful about that as an organizational management specialist is I could map that onto what I call a RACI framework, an organizational management framework, to say, okay, that's conception. That's like we get paid big bucks in the workplace for noticing and making new ideas. Then the women were the ones who said that they monitored the mustard for when it ran low.
Yes.
And got stakeholder buy-in.
Replenishment.
For what replenishment, also what stakeholder buy-in for what the family needed at the grocery store. They didn't say stakeholder buy-in, but I was mapping it on the planning structure.
What stakeholder buy-in?
Stakeholder buy-in is like, all the stakeholders here.
Yeah.
What do you need? The reason why it was a both was because it was men going to the store to go pick up the mustard. And then they're bringing spicy Dijon home every fucking time. And we asked for yellow. And this gets back to the presenting problem is not the real problem. It wasn't about the mustard. That was my aha moment. This is about accountability and trust. Because then women came back to me and said, Eve, I'm not going to trust my partner with my living will, which is under your estate planning.
When he brings me spicy mustard.
Because how can he do my living will? He can't even bring home the right type of mustard.
Wowzers.
So that's cognitive labor.
Wowzers.
Conception and planning behind the scenes to the execution is cognitive labor. And women do 100% of that. And that's why the labor is even more invisible than we think, because there is no both. I don't care who does execution. What Fair Play broke through was I care about ownership. I only will count a task in your fairness if you own it. Conception, planning, and execution stay together.
That's amazing. Groceries have come up as a contentious issue in our household recently. I want to give you the scenario because I think you'll find it somewhat entertaining, but it's going to be a scenario you've seen 1,000 times before. I was exhausted. I think I just traveled back from a long trip or whatever it was. Long story short, I was exhausted. I was like, I don't have the capacity to go and do the groceries today. I also did them last week, so I'm like, I'm off the hook. This one's over to Eric for this. Eric, can you go and get the groceries? Yeah, I'll go and get the groceries. What do you need? Just, the normal stuff. But what do you need? Just like use the list, you know what I mean? But you have to tell me what you need. I don't have the capacity to tell you what I need. Like this was a huge issue in our household. Yes. I knew I'd fucked up. From the get-go. Eric leaves the house. He's pissed because as far as he's concerned, I'm withholding information.
Yep.
And I'm pissed because I'm like, why can't he just use the list that we did last month or whatever?
Haven't groceries been in the fridge for the past 4 years?
Yes, we've been together. We've been married a good 4 or 5 years now. He's got a good handle on what does and doesn't go in the fridge. He'll figure it out. He comes home through the door with one bag of groceries. And I looked up and I was just like, you're a piece of work. You were a piece of work. And I knew that this was punitive. I knew that there was going to be nothing in there that I needed that week. And I had to go to the grocery store the following day. And I didn't mind because I was already, by that point, I was recharged. I was like, and we talked about it today before you came here. It was in fact punitive. And, the interesting thing was my problem was, look, we've lived together for X amount of time. You should know what's in the fridge. Have a little look if you don't know. Also refer to the list that we have in our phones. We've sat down and we've talked about, we've got extensive lists, not systems. regards to the foods that we can and can't eat, like there is nothing in this world that Eric and I don't know about each other's diets. Whilst they change, there's no reason in my mind why he can't go out and just get the groceries. And more importantly, if he's not sure, just buy it. I'd much rather you come home with too much than too little. And so I was like, at that time when I felt like I really just needed, just replenish, just take this one thing off my plate, it became an even bigger issue.
Well, you're saying to Eric that you don't trust him anymore to go get groceries.
I mean,
that's a painful thing to hear if you're someone's partner.
I feel like I
don't
trust him implicitly.
Right? Because but he didn't take the accountability that you thought he needed. This is back to the accountability and trust, right? It's not about groceries. Like, where is your accountability here to take the time to research it? So this is why I think Fair Play became a love letter to men, because that's a classic CPE breakup.
Yeah.
That is literally solvable today. And especially because now you're more aware of it and you just, you'll use new language. That's a classic CPE breakup. So I'm not worried about you guys.
Who?
All right, so
okay, there's no right or wrong.
No, there's no right or wrong. So this is what happens when you break up C and P and E.
Yeah.
So again, let's just pretend this is the workplace. Again, if you're the person holding the cognitive labor, let's just picture it in the workplace. That means you have an employee who comes in every day and says, "Hey, Louise, what should I be doing today? I'm going to sit here until you tell me what to do."
And I just turn around and say,
that's not going to work at your gym. You're fired. Or you figure it out, or you're fired, right? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't work for the person holding the cognitive labor. But if you're on the other side and you're just the executor to someone else's conception and planning, you lose psychological safety. Mm-hmm. Because you already know you're set up to fail.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to get anything right. And so you lose confidence. And then what happens with that? So again, picture the workplace. It's like your boss says to you, just come into this meeting, take notes. And you have no idea what the context is. You have no idea why you're there. Like, you probably know your notes are going to suck because you don't know what you're there to listen for, or you take too many notes and you didn't get to distill the appropriate concepts because you didn't know what to listen for. So that's a classic CPE breakup. So how do you go from a list to a system in that case? What I would love for you to do is, and this is my homework for you and Eric.
I love this.
I want you to, and you don't have to do every question. I want you to do a couple of things this week for me to start thinking and practicing fair play. I want you to just start with like 2 cards. So let's do 2 of the daily grind cards. Let's do dishes and groceries. Mm-hmm. And this is what I just want you to do this week. I don't even want you to say who's going to handle what yet. I want you just to practice asking each other what you remember about those things growing up.
Ooh, good question.
Because people think they know so much about their partners and they actually know very little. Mm. And so, like, and I'll ask you that. Tell me about groceries growing up. Do you remember how did groceries get into your refrigerator when you were a kid?
My mum got them.
Okay.
And I would often accompany her to the grocery store to help.
Did you have a father in the house?
Yes.
And did you have siblings?
Yes.
Are you the oldest child?
I'm the youngest.
The youngest. So you were the youngest one coming with your mom.
Yeah.
And do you remember anything fun about the grocery store, or was it annoying to have to do that?
Loved it.
Why?
Loved it.
Why did you love it?
Because we love shopping. Me and my mum were spendaholics.
Mm.
Yeah.
Even in the grocery store?
Yeah. It did get to the point where she would drag me along later on in life so that she could show me off in front of her friends. When I started to win like gold medals,
yes.
She started to use me as a trophy wife.
Oh, I love that. Even in the grocery store, she's like, "Where's your medal?"
Yeah, she would genuinely be like, let's go to the local superstore. And I'm like, okay, Mum, let's go. It was a social thing for her.
But also, like, how beautiful. There's so much I just learned about you, and that I was just trying to get under 20 seconds to see, like, in the past 20 seconds, I know more about you than our entire conversation.
Yeah. I
know you grew up in a 2-parent household. I know that you have siblings. I know that your mom was really proud of you, which makes me want to tear up.
Adorbs.
I love that we know that there's memories still, like fun memories, core memories that you have of like that task. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important because that allows a couple, when you have emotion attached to a chore, it allows you to stop seeing this as chores and housework and see it as your humanity. Because what you're going to realize about the fair play cards, and eventually you'll upgrade, I'll make you do them all. But the beauty of asking Eric those questions, and I'm so interested to hear what Eric would have to say, but I think you start to understand that for my husband, he would say to me when I asked him about groceries that he never stepped foot in a grocery store his entire life.
Wowzers.
In fact,
How did he eat?
his mother would give him these neat and Al sandwiches, this like deli here,
Yeah.
and literally just drive past his elementary school and like drop off sandwiches at his school.
Stop. They weren't meatball marinara, were they?
No, they were.
He and Eric didn't have the same mum, no?
I actually don't know what they are. I was gonna assume they were more like pastrami and like coleslaw, but it could have been a meatball sub. Whereas, in my house, similar to you, I didn't have, the gold medal and it wasn't from Pride, but every Sunday, we knew that Pathmark, which was in Chinatown, would have sales on like the no frills stuff. I always wanted Tide. I always wanted like the detergent that had like the red bottle. We always had to get something that was called literally no frills.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating. The no frills spaghetti, the no frills spaghetti sauce, the no frills dryer sheets. And we'd go because there was always this like no frills sale. And I always remember being freezing because we'd be stuck in like the produce aisles or the frozen food aisles for too long.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going in there anymore. I'm freezing. So then as I got older as a teenager, I remember being in this broken down Dodge Aries waiting for her while she went in. I'd blast the heat with my brother and me in the car. But it's important because there's for me to assume that Seth would understand what my minimum standard of care is for the grocery store without any conversation, given how different our growing up backgrounds were, is a recipe for disaster. And it doesn't mean that Seth is a bigot or non-feminist or a monster.
Yeah.
He just has zero context. So then what Fair Play is about is it's ownership. And it's not ownership to say, well, Louise, you're the athlete, or you both are athletes, but you care more about groceries, so you should always handle it. No, it's Louise, you care so much about this. So as your partner, I want to learn more. And that's the investment that we forget. And so, not saying it's your fault or Eric's fault, but there was no onboarding to the groceries conversation in your scenario.
Right.
And that's the difference between a list and a system.
I want to talk about the Fair Play game.
Yes.
What is it?
We talked about the 100 cards. So this is how you play. I gave you a homework assignment of 2 of the cards. I want you to just talk to Eric about his grocery experience growing up and, as we said, dishes. Like who did the dishes in his house?
Can we change dishes for laundry?
Sure, laundry. I love it. I want to hear everything about what that was like for you growing up, what you remember, smells. Do you remember the smell of Bounce? Did you have dryer sheets? Where did you do your laundry? That's what I want. But typically, if you're playing the full Fair Play game, which I'm going to send you a full care package here, so don't worry. You'll get it all. But when you're playing the full game, it starts with 100. There's 100 cards. And so what I'm asking is that there is a very big onboarding process. But again, as an athlete, you'll understand that. You'll understand that to run under 4-minute sprint or whatever, that you're not getting there the first time, right? So it requires, as we said earlier, it's a game designed around practicing your boundaries, your systems, and your communication. So what the 100 cards allows you to do is sit down, and I'm helping you practice how to communicate. So I ask people to first talk about their childhood around the cards. And then once you sort of have and marinate in that conversation, the next step is you're going to look at the cards together and say, what's in and out of our deck?
Yeah.
Hopefully without kids, with whatever you have, other people's scenarios, whatever they have, you can have less or more. My goal is to have less cards to play with. It's going to be easier. But once you see your deck, you can say it's you and your partner against the cards. Mm-hmm. You already understand that ownership, I define that for you. Ownership, CPE, is the goal, that when somebody holds the card, that they're holding it with ownership. But you have to understand and define what ownership means. So for a groceries card, right, the ownership would be that the person is thinking about the groceries. They're planning by talking to you about what you need and what they need and what you may need for recipes of the week. And then they're actually going to the store. That's ownership. Doesn't mean you have to hold it forever. You can always redeal it back, but you redeal it back with full ownership. The problem is that's not enough. What we discovered over beta testing this for 10 years was that there had to be another step, which is
Yes.
why it's like a practice. We have to practice talking to each other about our minimum standard of care.
Right.
So
What is
when you're
that?
talking about the groceries, you understand most men, I would say the first thing they understood was CPE because they understood their workplace. They would understand conception, planning, and execution is the key to ownership. Totally got that. It became a really awesome, but what they had a hard time understanding is why is my minimum standard of care always so much lower than my partner's? And shouldn't that person compromise with me? Why is my minimum standard of care of a birthday party with pizza and family not enough?
Yes. And so they always feel like they're
their
doing a
minimum
shit job and it's
because your
not
minimum
enough.
standard of
I
care is
can't
too much.
please
I
you,
can't
so I'm
please
just
you.
going to either do nothing
Right.
or I'm going to just like, I'm checked out.
Or weaponize incompetence, where I'll do it once, I'll do it shitty, and then you never ask me to do it again.
Absolutely.
So what a minimum standard of care does is it allows you to say what you said to me earlier. If I knew that about you, Louise, that your minimum standard of care is when in doubt, buy it. That's really important because what if I didn't know that? Maybe it would be, well, you just wasted money on sour cream that I'm never going to eat or a cottage cheese brand I don't like.
And that's worse than
Right.
having 2 cottage cheeses.
Yes, right. So I like to know that you're saying try. And then the beauty is most of your groceries and your minimum standard of care, you can come up with a brand you like.
Mm-hmm.
One amazing couple said to me that no matter what, her husband decided to handle groceries. She was getting her doctorate. They had a blended family of 5 kids. No matter what, her partner couldn't bring home a small curd cottage cheese. It was always the large curd cottage cheese.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like the brand that she liked. And for some reason, it was just like a mental barrier. And at some point, she was like, you know what? Everything else is great. He's going to the store on time, minimum standard of care. When do you have to do it? It was Sunday before Monday. She wanted it so she could meal prep. She wanted the groceries to be done before 6 so she could do it before she was tired to get some food on the table for Mondays for her kids, to do some planning for their lunches before Monday. So they knew the minimum standard of care of the day that should happen, what time the stuff should come home, basically what the agreed upon list was. And so the one issue was this large curd versus small curd. And she's like, so I just gave up on it. I learned to like mix my cottage cheese with yogurt and it just was what it was. So that's the minimum standard of care.
I love that. I feel like that is a great point of compromise. This could be the minimum standard of care could save marriages
Yes,
worldwide.
It
No
does.
doubt. No doubt. No longer will we ever have any arguments about the groceries.
Well, I will say one thing about that though. This gets back to our boundary. We've talked systems now. We'll talk boundaries in a minute, but with communication, again, as an athlete, my favorite people in the world were coaches and military people because they understood fair play implicitly. They understood the power of systems. They understood besides like LeBron James, you're not putting your point guard in for your center. Like there are systems really can work.
Now with 2 athletes in the household, however,
But
doesn't the minimum standard of care become
up.
really high?
Yes, of course it does. But this is the thing. You guys understand systems.
Right.
And not only that, you understand practice. One of my favorite things during the pandemic is we gave a survey. We asked 1,000 people, what's your most important practice? Most people came back with some version of meditation or exercise. Not one of those 1,000 people said communication. So I'm going to say, even though you're both so high level in what you do, I promise you that I still will tell you with you and Eric that the most important practice you'll both have is not exercise.
Yeah.
It's not self-care. It's not meditation. It's not mindfulness.
Because we can do all
It's
of
gonna
those
be
things
communication.
solo.
Yep. And especially as a solo athlete.
Yes.
Communication is probably why you steered yourself to solo athletics as opposed to the team. You don't have to communicate with as many people when you're a solo athlete. So a lot of it becomes a very independence mindset.
Yeah.
I can do this all myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the best success formula for the team mentality that we need for a marriage. And so what I like to say is you can't say, no, we'll never have a disagreement about groceries again. You're going to have to discuss the minimum standard
We'll
of care.
have meaningful disagreements.
Meaningful.
Yeah, that would be good.
Because it's a practice.
Yes.
And if you understand it's a practice and you understand that you're coming into your practice. When you practice, it's a practice because there's vulnerabilities that you're trying to get better at. So one other piece of homework I'll do with you is I'll ask you to ask Eric, what does he think your vulnerabilities are? It's like a reverse newlywed game.
Ooh, good question.
And I'm going to ask you to guess what he said, what he thinks his vulnerabilities are. So I love that because it's a fun game to say, and then you get to guess what he thinks his vulnerabilities are, and he'll guess what you think, what you say yours are.
That's hilarious.
Do you have a off the cuff guess for what he would say your vulnerabilities are?
My vulnerabilities,
Communication wise?
communication.
Yes.
Just straight up communication.
So avoidance.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, good. So you actually don't communicate the words.
You
You think your mind needs to be read?
No.
Okay. So
I
tell
would
me.
say it's actually the way I say it.
Oh, so it's tone.
Yes, definitely
Okay.
tone. Yeah, because
Joel Sargent.
yeah, I would say there's not so much because I'm very, in my mind every single day, there's 1,000 things. So I'm thinking about being really efficient with my communication. So if I ask somebody to do something, I expect it to be registered and I don't have to say it again. And so he would
By the way,
basically...
that even scared me because you had this beautiful smile on your face, and the second you went into that two
Yeah.
sentences, it got very serious. And
Dictator.
The smile went away.
He's He would basically say I'm a dictator.
Yeah.
And so the tone is, I think, really important to him. It's not so much like what I say, it's definitely how I say it. That's what I think would be my biggest flaw.
And by the way, what I love about that is when you play that game, the person gets a chance to reflect and say, oh my God, I can't believe you knew that. Or no, actually, it's this other thing that bothers me. I have a tone problem as well. And now what's beautiful about knowing that is in my practice, I can say, I just went back to really bad habits.
Yeah.
When
Got
you're
you.
practicing, you're moving to better habits, but it doesn't mean your bad habits
Go away
are going away
immediately or overnight.
Yeah, and it becomes more humorous. I'm like, oh, I did that thing again. I did the all or nothing where I said, Seth, you're the worst. Sometimes I will go verbal assassin and be really calm and say, Seth, did you know you're the worst father that probably has ever existed in terms of fathers? Like I'll say really mean things, but in a very calm tone. Yeah.
Bless you.
Yes.
By the way, Eric is off camera right now. He's feeling very vindicated. I've actually seen him just literally just taking points. He's just been writing points, checking these things
Well, I
off.
said this is a love letter to him.
I love it. So what do women stand to gain by dividing household tasks fairly? And more importantly, what is the difference? Is there a difference between equal and fair?
I think women think sometimes they have more to gain by keeping the peace, and that's what's really hard. So obviously, God forbid, we're not talking about anybody who has abuse in their marriages. We're talking about, marriages where you feel safe. But that makes me reflect on this one woman who I met during the pandemic on DM. There was a Facebook group out of the UK, actually, which I was surprised by, given that I don't always look at people in the UK as people who emote. But they had this Facebook group that was called The Reasons I Hate My Husband and Kids During COVID. And this one woman wrote in this Facebook group, if my husband dies because of COVID, during this COVID period, it won't be because of the disease, it'll be because of me. So I DM'd her, I reached out to her. Someone had tagged me in it and said, you should talk to this person. So I reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm a researcher on relationships, and I want to know how you communicate with your partner. And she said, I don't communicate with my partner. This is my safe space.
Wowzers.
So I kept reflecting on that publicly threatening to murder her partner in front of 27,000 strangers felt safer to her than speaking directly to that person.
Wowzers.
So why I bring that up is because that's not an okay way to live. It's just not. And I think a lot of women are living that way, where they'll tell their friends that their partner is stressing them out. We know, we just came up with our nonprofit just had a huge study that showed women are shouldering all of this conception and planning, as we talked about, this cognitive labor, and it's hurting their personal burnout and their relationship satisfaction. They're literally burning out.
Yes.
So we know that women's mental and physical health actually, it's not optional to work on the gender division of labor. Yes, I'm giving you more work as a woman because typically you're the one, quote unquote, who's more oppressed. But since when did unions get two weekend days for all of us workers? Unless it wasn't the bosses who said, let's give workers 2 days off, right? It was strikes. It was organized labor. Like, we have to understand that the work to get to the table is hard. But once you're there, it's so worth it. That man, like the person who assumed that he was the fulfiller, I was the fulfiller of his smoothie needs. Like, I'm still married to Seth. But it was also because he was willing to understand how painful this was for me. And that's such a beautiful segue to the last piece of the secret formula. We spent a lot of time on systems and we just spent a lot of time on communication. But boundaries, Louise, is often why women are not sharing the load, because they are believing that they are on this earth to be just three things: a parent and or a partner and or a professional. And that their time outside of that doesn't matter. And so that's unfortunately why this work is so painful and often needs a trigger warning. It's not because I'm giving you a system that makes sense. Everybody wants things to be more efficient. It's not because I'm telling you how to communicate. It's because often women feel so sad about the fact that their identity has now become wrapped up in their roles. And women deserve, there's one thing that women will always be united in. At some point in your life, we're going to be defined by a role. And so together we can break out of that. And that's what I think is the most beautiful thing for women. If they don't believe they don't need this, or they like being that caregiver, they have to understand that their mental and physical burnout literally relies on them being something other than a parent and or a partner and a professional.
That's beautiful. We recently started a run club on Saturday mornings at the Hollywood Bowl. And there was something very, very deep happening amongst the women. And I was like, just as women are coming through the door, people that I recognize from our gym and people that I don't recognize are meeting for the first time, and watching the smiles on their faces deepen as we tell them to go and sprint. And just literally we're going to do a relay today. And like watching grown women back playing was like something so fulfilling about that. And we've had so much like amazing feedback of like people just saying, it's Tuesday and I'm already looking forward to Saturday, or this is like the most important part of my week. How important is it that we as women create those boundaries? How do we first of all put them in place, but how do we save some time and space for ourselves?
Because it's not optional, Louise. Like what you just did was so interesting because that was not scripted, but that was actually my first research question for my second book, which was there was so much hesitation for women to adopt fair play because they said they didn't know what to do with any time that they would get back from the efficiency. And that was so alarming to me that I had to write a whole second book about it. The first question we asked, ironically, since we didn't script this, was what you just said. The first question I asked for my second book for the research was, I want you to name something that you did this week. I want to know what the most important thing you did this week was that was outside your roles as a parent, partner, or professional. You just said that all those women said the most important part of their week or what they were looking forward to most was the run club. Most women in our studies, again, in these 18 countries, did not have that. They couldn't actually think about one thing that they had done in the past month that was outside the role of a parent, partner, and professional that felt important to them. And so that was what was incredibly alarming. So to show up at a run club, what you just did, it requires, I think, people to understand that I call that creativity. A run club is creative. The way I define creativity is it's that it's not optional, because these types of practices, a creative practice, what I call a unicorn-based practice, not because I like unicorns, but because I think the idea of this mythical, magical being is beautiful, but they actually don't exist unless you take it back.
Yes.
And I think that space we now know that there is a really important, a lot of data that having curiosity, connection with others, and a completion point is the key to mental health. So what I love so much about your run club, think about it. I wonder what it would feel like to do a relay again. That's curiosity. Shit, I don't want to do this because I run like me, like a 40-minute mile. So it's going to remind me of being a kid again. I'm going to be picked last in the relay. I'm not going to be able to do it. You have to share yourself with the world. That's connection.
Yeah.
It's scary. That's the scary part. That's why this is not a soul cycle class. Then you have to complete something. You actually have to complete the relay. You have to complete the run. Most people, I was surprised. I thought most women, their hurdle, because you asked, what is the key to boundaries? I always thought that the key to boundaries was finding your curiosity and being able to fight for it. The key to most women's boundaries that we know is actually the completion point. It's not living in the graveyard of unfulfilled dreams. My research, it wasn't curiosity. Women were curious about a lot of things. They were willing to share themselves with the world, but they didn't want to even start because they'd say to me, what's the point of running? I'm never going to be able to run past X, Y, and Z. Like they didn't understand that completion was not perfection. Think about your life. You won a gold medal.
Yeah.
So what is completion ever going to look like in any other practice to you? Do you feel like you have to get a gold medal in trapeze? In
Yes.
a pottery practice?
Absolutely, yes.
In jewelry making, wherever I take you,
Yeah.
in your book club, you have to read the book the fastest and know the most.
Yes.
I worry about that for you, Louise.
Yeah, it's a
because
problem.
as you get older and as you do more things, I want you to understand that, yes, you've been perfect by societal standards in certain things, but your completion points don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, they don't have to define me.
Yes.
The problem is, Eve, I'm extremely good at a number of things.
Yes.
Like
yes.
it's kind of annoying. I said to my friends, don't invite me bowling. Bowling frustrates me because I'm like, if I'm crap at bowl, like if it's not a 10, it's no
That's
fun.
That's what I'm saying.
It's no
It's not
fun
that you're
to
not
me.
curious about, what would it feel like to pick up the bowling pin? It's not that you wouldn't share yourself with the world. But if you're not going to get a strike every time,
What's the point?
What's the point?
Absolutely. So do you know what I've done? Every year
Yes.
now, if I go back to the UK, in fact, this year, we took my nephews and nieces bowling. And I made it, you know what I mean? I have to mentally check myself. And I'm like, I'm doing this because I'm a good aunt and I'm doing it for them. And I'm going to have fun with it. And I'm actually just going to play to beat my eldest brother, not to win. As long as I beat him, it's all good. It's all gravy.
Well, what I'm going to say to you, even more important than that, is I don't want you to say that you're doing it for other people. I want you to understand that your growth mindset is in understanding that completion is not perfection. Like daring to suck for you is the same way that for me, doing one endurance challenge is going to be daring to complete it.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that I have a lot of unicorn spaces. That's these curiosity, connection, completion. It started off as this book, this wonder, curiosity. I wonder what it would feel like to write about my marriage. It became now my work. So then I needed more. And then I went back to hip hop dance, which I loved. But then, of course, I wasn't going to turn. Older. I wasn't going to have the same ability to turn and follow choreographies. So I had to understand that completion was not going to become for perfection. And now I'm doing this outdoors endurance challenge. And I think what's really interesting is I talked to a group of women who are also doing it. And I said to them, my completion point is 5 ascents. And so they kept speaking back and saying, no, but the race is 8. And I said, no, my completion point is 5 ascents.
What does that mean then?
And so for them, the fact that I'm not even training to finish the race.
Got you.
One woman said to me, basically, so Eve, what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not how I look at it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I now understand the data of like when you have a completion point, a boundary can mean the opposite. It can mean not starting at all, which is what a lot of women have. But for someone like you, the boundary can mean I don't care how society defines this.
Yes.
But this is what my completion point is going to be.
What are some not so common tasks that majority of couples face, but they don't think to divide?
I had a professor, a PhD, tenured professor at USC help me with this. because what I noticed was that there were a lot of tasks that everybody seemed to understand were household tasks, like garbage, dishes, laundry. And then also with those tasks, they kept saying, well, if we're so overwhelmed, we'll get help.
Mm-hmm.
What people failed to realize was that there's something called the emotional labor tasks. There are 50 of them in the Fair Play deck. Doesn't mean you're playing with them all. But those are the ones that I think were the most insidious, but also the most beautiful. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, one of the tasks is called in-laws. One of the tasks is called informal education. That's one where maybe you want your child to learn to ride a bike. Maybe you want your child to learn to tie their shoe. People are not thinking about that as care or labor. Another one that I think is really fun was magical beings.
What's
Like,
magical beings?
That is, do you want to be a tooth fairy for your child? Do you want to be Santa? Do you believe in Lucky Leprechaun? So there's all these tasks that weren't fitting into the home and what I call the out suits. So in the Fair Play deck, there's 4 suits. The 2 that were called caregiving and magic, those were the ones that I felt were falling through the cracks because those were the ones with huge gender assumptions. Well, what do you mean? You're so much better at this. Another one was hosting. Like, sure, I'll show up, but you're so much better at welcoming people to there are a lot of emotional labor in those tasks. So what's beautiful about them is that they're in the Fair Play deck. You can, in your show notes, you can link, we're a nonprofit. We have all of our stuff online. You can look at those with your partner and say, these are the really invisible ones. And I would love for us to look together at like what of these we value. A big one is holidays and holiday cards and spirituality. Those three particularly don't get talked about enough. How do we want our holidays to look? Whose households do we want to be at? What does that look like? Do you think I'm in charge of this? Am I in charge? And then there's another card called gifts. Am I in charge of all the gift giving? Do we do it for each of our households? What does that emotional labor look like? So those are the things I encourage the most because those are the most invisible.
When's the right time for couples to establish some fair household rules?
I was just talking about this to my friend's daughter who's 16. She has her first boyfriend. And I gave her the Fair Play cards. And I said, you should start asking questions now. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Practice. This is probably not the person you're going to end up marrying, but it would be cool to know because the first practice I told you is the homework I gave you. It's not saying, oh, you have to do my laundry. But what it's saying is, what does laundry look like in your house? Have you ever had to do laundry? Who does it for you? And then, what does garbage look like in your house? I wish I had done that when Seth and I were just dating. I would have learned that he actually loves garbage.
Oh, he does?
That he would sleep on Domino's pizza boxes. He somehow during his rush, he lost his pillow. Never got another pillow, so he would sleep as a pillow on a disgusting old used pizza box.
Yuck.
So my husband loves trash. And he had a housekeeper growing up who took the trash out. So I sort of wish I knew that he had no context for what I thought garbage was. Whereas in my house, I grew up in a tenement in the Lower East Side and we had cockroaches and water bugs everywhere. I had a disabled brother that I put to bed because my mom worked nights. And I remember for us, when the garbage was just on the knob, like that takeout bag, that it would spill over. It would lead to more cockroaches. I'd close my eyes, let the cockroaches scatter, go get my brother water, and leave the kitchen. I'm incredibly triggered by trash. And so I sort of wish that I was 16 or when I met Seth at 23, that we had that conversation about just our differing perspectives over what garbage looked like. Because I had to tell Seth these stories about myself eventually to finally get him to take trash seriously, put the garbage liner back in where he thought I was like a trash stalker because he couldn't believe my obsession with getting trash out of the house.
Got you. Nuts. So splitting household tasks, doesn't it just, let's say you split them evenly, doesn't it just kill your sex life?
1,000,000% not. It's literally the opposite. We have now 3 separate studies that show fairness. And of course, fairness is going to make you someone sexier. Someone it's going to make you, when you have accountability and trust, like you love that person more. Like what person is like, oh, I don't like someone more because I can trust them.
Do you want to know what my love language is?
Yes.
Acts of service.
Acts of service.
There's
But
nothing better.
Louise,
Nothing better.
but do you understand that it's a Maslow's hierarchy? So women always think, oh, it's so weird that my love language is acts of service. Every woman's love language
Oh,
is
I didn't
acts of
know
service.
that.
Everybody.
That's so good.
What's interesting is you can go to gifts. You can go to words of affirmation after you get your acts of service.
Yeah.
So that's why I call it the Maslow's hierarchy. We like all those things, but it always starts with the acts of service. So we see that, and on TikTok, some people make fun of it and call it chore play, where a man does a chore to have sex. I'm not into that link because what I want men to understand is like, you're not taking out the trash. You're not executing the trash, not doing the cognitive labor, doing one task, being like, hey, look what I did.
Exactly.
And expecting sex.
And
no,
reward.
I'm coming as a partner to this relationship. I see your unpaid labor, Louise, and I'm going to double it because I know that it's important to you. I'm coming back with double the groceries next time, and we're going to talk about it before I go. And then you're going to just I'm including you in the planning, but I own it. And I'll go back to the grocery store if I didn't get what our minimum standard of care was. That leads to sex.
Yeah.
And I will say that that is what we see literally over and over again. And you know who understands it the most?
Go on.
Men who have second wives.
Oh.
In our data, the
How
men who have,
so?
they understand that that's the key to their sex life. They understand that it's the key to marriage.
What is it that they've figured out?
I think they figured out how much they messed up in their first marriage.
Right.
And that acts of service is all women's love language. And so without fail, even if they have more money, more resources, we always see that men report they hold more cards with their second marriage. It's just, maybe there's 1 or 2 outliers, but on a whole, that's what we found.
Eve, what happens if we don't find fairness in the home?
Well, 2 things happen. The most sad is when I hear men say to me, it makes me still really sad. Men will say to me, I'll ask them, are you proud of your partner? And so they'll say to me, I couldn't do without her. She's the key to my life. And so I'll say, okay, that's a personal assistant. Keep going. She's the best mother. Okay, that's a role. That's a parent. Keep going. And then if a woman doesn't have her own boundaries, her own unicorn space, then often men will hesitate there and say, I call it the she used to syndrome. She used to be top of her class at Harvard Business School. She used to run this amazing company before we had kids. That's when I know there's going to be trouble in the relationship.
Got you.
Because the expectations of who someone married starts to change based on this lack of accountability and trust and resentment that starts to build. So I'd say that's the most common if people stay in the relationship. But the other thing, as I said earlier, is that women initiate a supermajority of divorces. And so we see that men enter care in ways that they didn't want to enter care. And so I'd say at YPO, when I'm at men's conferences, when I'm brought in, that's typically what I hear. I didn't do any of this. My wife got cancer. I had to step up. Or she left me out of the blue. Or she had an emotional affair. And it's shocking to a lot of men. But what they're not understanding is that the consequences of not having fairness is that the relationship erodes. Now, if men can connect that to what I call my favorite TED Talk, that's I think the most popular of all time. It's been watched more than any other TED Talk. It's by a man named Robert Waldinger. That's another piece of homework. It's only about 15 minutes.
Love that.
Harvard ran a 75-year longitudinal study of men. And what they found when they controlled for age, weight, location, environment, that really the most quality predictor of whether a man was alive at 85 was the quality of his relationships at 55. So I wish men understood that this is life or death for them. The investment in unpaid labor, what we're talking about in care, in our humanity, these invisible tasks is really the key to their longevity.
Yeah. Because there's that lady on Facebook. Eve, last question. What did you come to slay?
Guilt and shame, because I think what I've learned about it, and my colleague, Dr. Becky, will say this as well. She's a great parenting expert. We have a very similar view of guilt and shame. I think slaying guilt and shame is actually, and look, slay could be something that is amazing. I'm talking about slaying, like slaying that dragon, like the opposite definition of slaying. I think to slay, you have to slay guilt and shame. And what I want women especially to understand about guilt and shame is that oftentimes the things that you think are making you guilty are actually not guilt at all.
What are they?
Typical guilt is when something's out of alignment with your values, Louise. So you yelled at your driver on the way to the airport because he didn't get you there on time. I will allow you to feel guilty for that because that's out of alignment with your values. Typically, though, women use guilt and shame as a behavioral emotion not to do something. I didn't go on the business trip because I felt guilty that I was missing my child's first day of school.
Yeah.
The business trip is in alignment with your values. Being home with your child is in alignment with their values. If you choose always the guilt and shame one, that's not guilt. What that is it's anticipating someone else's discomfort. You're anticipating your child's discomfort.
Yeah.
You're anticipating your partner's discomfort by you not being there. You're anticipating your mother-in-law's discomfort. You're anticipating your community's discomfort. So I wish women can understand that that has to go. If you recognize it's not guilt, then you can make a decision in a much better way. You can say, these are both in alignment with my values. If I don't think about someone else's discomfort, and I think about what's internally important to me, which would I choose? And so I'm not saying you don't always choose care. Of course, people's discomfort matters. But what I'm saying is we're always choosing that because we think of that as guilt and shame. So that's what I would say. Let's slay guilt and shame so that we can open up ourselves for better decision making, whether it's for our boundaries, our systems, and definitely for our communication.
Eve, you absolutely smashed that out the park. What have you got coming up and where can we find you?
Our documentary is on Hulu. So if anybody wants to watch it, I would love for them to go onto Hulu, search for Fair Play, and you can see our new documentary that's out.
Amazing. Super excited to get that under the belt, wanting to play the game, and we'll definitely be asking Eric about all things groceries and laundry this week.
Yes. Tell your stories.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Slay podcast.
Thank you so much.
That concludes this episode of Slay. Stay tuned for more empowering discussions on female health, fitness, and life. You can follow Eve at Eve Rodsky on Instagram, and you can follow me at Louise Hazel. You can also follow Slay at Slay Athletic Club. And don't forget to subscribe to the Slay podcast if you haven't done so already on YouTube. You can also get fit at home using the Slay app. You can download that now for free from the App Store to join our online community. And lastly, if you're in Los Angeles, come and join us on Saturdays at 9:30 at the Hollywood Bowl for Slay Athletic Club, our new run club experience for women. Hit the link in my bio on Instagram to register.